Hello, it's Sarah Sabin, Executive and Team Coach here with the Leading in the Modern Way video interview series. And I am thrilled to have with me today Toby Babb, who is founder and CEO of the Harrington Starr Group. Toby, hello, welcome to the show. And would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, listen, lovely to be here, and thank you very much for having me on. So, as you said, yes, I'm Toby Babb of the Harrington Starr Group. The Harrington Starr Group is a recruitment group of three different companies. Harrington Starr, which is a recruitment group into the financial technology space, working with banks, hedge funds, asset managers, and software companies in that area. The North Star is a tech sales business, so it works with SaaS businesses and cyber businesses, predominantly in Tel Aviv. It's based here in London, but it works with companies out in Tel Aviv, Series A, B, C businesses, focusing on helping them grow their go-to-market teams out in America, which is an interesting sort of model for, based from here in London. So very little of their business is actually done in the UK. Most of it's done internationally from there as well. And then at the start of this year, we launched our third business in the group, which is called Search 5.0. That's based out in Belfast and covers predominantly the Irish market. And that's focuses on software engineering. So we've got three areas there that we think are in growth mode and have enormous potential to it: fintech, technology sales, and the whole SaaS world, and then software engineering and everything everywhere within it. So been running now for 13 years. I've been in the industry for 23, so a veteran of it all. And pleased to say I love what I do.
Very interesting and truly a global brand there. I'd love to know more about the origins. So you've been in the industry for 23 years. You've been running your own show for 13 years. What inspired you to make that transition into running your own business?
So I guess that goes back to when I first went into the industry. I joined a business called the S3 Group, which floated a few years later. And it was 12 different companies in the group at that stage. So we were the 12th company. I was the most experienced person with a day before the next person joined up, reporting into our boss who'd been with it I think he was probably in his late 20s at that sort of stage. And what they were very good at was backing entrepreneurs and giving them the opportunity to be entrepreneurial in a group of companies. And I loved it. And that company was 450 people when I joined. And 8 years later, when I left, it was 2,500, over 64 profit centers all over the world, and continues to be a sort of powerhouse of the industry. But what it did very well was give people opportunities to grow and build companies under its own umbrella. And that always inspired me. When it floated, it sort of consolidated a little bit more and sort of ran through various different companies and became less entrepreneurial. But I think the sort of vision of being, startups always stayed with me. And I did 2 years in another PLC after that. And then the idea was always to go out there and replicate and try and build a similar sort of thing to what I'd loved as soon as I got into the industry over at the S3 Group originally.
Mm. So on that topic of entrepreneurialism, is that an environment that you encourage within the Harrington Starr Group?
Yeah, absolutely. So both of the two companies that have come out are run by people who sort of moved through the ranks with me. James, who runs North Star, we've worked together for 18 years in three different companies. And during the pandemic, it was clear that he wanted to come in there and do something a little bit more and run a show. And he's been fantastic about doing that and very, very creative, and sort of saw the opportunity in Israel and taken that further forward, and has some very exciting plans for what he's doing with the business. So he runs that business, and I sort of move further and further away from it as he sort of is allowed to sort of go through and or allows me to move backwards so he can go through and run a great business over there. And then we hired a couple of people out in Belfast to work in the Harrington Starr brand, and they've done a phenomenal job within that, and we saw an opportunity, and I knew that they were people who wanted to go out there and do something more, and they've built a business there that's gaining major traction in its first year. I'm really impressed with what they're doing, so we want to keep on doing that and building that and giving people opportunities to do that in the States. Our New York business is run by a guy called Adam Mills, who's effectively running that business on a day-to-day basis, and we're excited about that sort of opportunity. We had someone who's only 2 years into his career to go out and work alongside Adam and build out a new area of that business alongside it as well. So there's a lot of opportunity, and I believe in backing people to to do things and create things in this sort of market. So yeah, we're excited about that.
Mm. And do you know what comes to my mind? The quote, leaders create other leaders. And I see you very much doing that because you're talking about backing other people, and those people start new arms of the business and go and lead new teams. So I'd love to know a little bit more about how you personally define strong leadership and how you see it impacting the growth of the group in general.
Yeah, so starting with the second half of that question, I think we had a an offsite recently with with our board, and I think the kingmaker for us over the course of the next sort of 5 10 years is very much about the strength of leadership we're able to create in the business and bring in and attract to the business. Ideally, that would always be organic for me. I'd like to see people develop and grow through the business and give them opportunities. And I think that's much more inspiring and energizing and enthusing as a business. And in terms of what strong leadership looks like, I think, 10, 20 years ago, when I first got into the industry, strong leadership would all be about dominance and making people do stuff and being very authoritative and having my first boss was an absolute sergeant major. And I loved that because it gave really disciplined process to me at an early stage in my career that I think I'd have struggled without. But I think as that's evolved, strong leadership to me becomes through predominantly leading by example. If you look at 3 E's around it, leading by example and setting a strong example for your team and making sure you're not someone there who's sort of sat there barking out orders and not contributing or driving or living the values of what you are as a business and who you want to be as a business. I think empathy is incredibly important in making sure that you recognize that every single person in your team and business are going to be different and motivated by slightly different things in slightly different ways. And then the ability to energize or enthuse, I think, is an important part of it. So, I think there are different types of leaders who can do that in different types of ways. And I think there will be people there who will be very pragmatic and be able to deliver through just allowing people to do it. But the people who can set the vision and inspire people by that vision and show what it means to them and tailor them to that, to the what's in it for me aspect, that to me is incredibly important. So if we've got a fabric of leaders in here who are working on a day-to-day basis with the team, my view of that is they should be inspiring, energizing, and enthusing. They should be listening to the individuals and tailoring stuff to them and tailoring training to them and making them better. And my view is if we can take people and say, right, how can we get them, playing to the absolute peak of their performance consistently, and then constantly finding that thing and constantly motivating and stretching. That to me is what we want to have as a business all the way through, so we can create a high performance environment that allows high performance results, which in our industry I think is the key to job satisfaction.
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me because I've at this stage interviewed the leaders of a few recruitment businesses in the US and the UK. And what is interesting is that this kind of leadership that you're talking about, empathetic, helping people to meet their goals, was something discussed, which almost seems at odds to recruitment's reputation, right? As this kind of sharky environment where employees are just kind of out to outcompete each other, and the client isn't well serviced because it's all about commission. But I'm interested in your view on how this kind of empathetic approach to leadership internally translates into a better service for clients.
Yeah, so this is my sort of soapbox thing that I've always been very passionate about, right? So I spent the first sort of 8 to 10 years of my career in environments there where people didn't necessarily have an enormous amount of respect for themselves and what they did as a profession, as a recruitment industry. I've always been very passionate about the fact that every CEO in every building that I'm sat around here in central London will cite that people are their most important asset. That if they get the people right, no matter what their product or go-to-market strategy, it will be sorted if they have the right people around them. Yet they're prepared to work with agencies who are effectively putting bums on seats and chucking CVs, and you've got this sort of very sharky sort of old school attitude towards recruitment as a profession. And it's marked at if you look at the back of the Times and you see all the listed companies, there's professional services and you see law management consultancy, accountancy, and then you've got this sort of black sheep in the corner of recruitment consultancies, of which there's a few listed recruitment businesses within it. And I want to flip that narrative. And when we started this business, it was about making sure that people were successful through it. And we wanted to add value, which is why we do things like our magazine, the number of podcasts, number of events that we do. We try and build very much a community that allows people to prosper from being part of that community. So we're trying to add, and it's almost like the day job is putting great people into great businesses to allow them to fuel and create great careers. So we have this mantra of your success, our business. And your success, our business, is making sure our consultants, our clients, and our candidates are all more successful from having worked with us than anything we can be. Now, that might also be growing clients' teams as the day job, but we'll also try and grow their brands and grow their networks at the same time as well, and introduce people and be valuable and be of service to an industry. And I think when you start looking at that and you start to bring people in who've got that same sort of mentality, and you attract a tribe who are not just there to, I didn't want another business where it's, my biggest rivals were to my left and my right. I didn't want a business where it's very cutthroat. I didn't want a business where the customer was seen as something, almost as a means to an end. I wanted to make sure we were creating great not transactional, but transformational relationships and adding real value to the people who we're talking to. So we're just trying to take an industry I'm very, very passionate about and put a spin on it that allows a lot more value to be added to it, which I think then leads in naturally, because you're attracting those people to have a lot more empathy around how, what, and where you're doing it. And at the same time, you need to make sure you've got high standards and high performance around that at the same sort of stage. But I don't think that's necessarily about the old school factor of having everyone on board and using humiliation as a tool to get people to do stuff.
Coming back to inspirational leadership as opposed to authoritarian leadership, perhaps authoritarian leadership worked better with previous generations, but as new generations are coming through the workforce, what I'm observing is that it's not fit for purpose anymore. Do you have any views on that?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because I can think of examples of companies who maintained a very old school approach and are still thriving. So I think it's about, my view is being authentic to who and what you are. And those businesses who sort of play very much down that sort of route can still be successful. And look, they might have more churn, but they've got a model that understands that they'll have churn in their piece. And the people who come in there and adapt to that will do incredibly well, and the people who it's not for will move out and potentially, unfortunately, be lost to the industry where they could be exceptional in a different environment. So look, I think if I was to sit here and go back to how I first bought into it and be very KPI orientated and be very sort of, right, you're here from X till Y and you're not going out for any breaks and you've got to be strapped to your desk and we're going to make it sort of really, I think, in honesty, could we get more performance out of certain individuals from that sort of mentality? Probably. Would we have a lot more churn and be less successful on the other side of it? Quite feasibly as well. So I think it's about being, authentic, and I feel like I can be authentic in our business. I feel like we've got authentic people leading in authentic ways. I don't think there are people there who are wildly out of their comfort zone or being a different person when they come to work, etc. Although my daughter told me this weekend that I have a work voice and I have a normal voice. I wouldn't have picked that out, but that's something from it. But I think, to me, it's about authenticity, and yes, I do think that there's generational differences in those generations, but within generations, I think it's difficult to badge everyone by the same, under the same file, and I think there will be people in each generation who respond differently in different ways. We had massive churn when I first got into the industry, despite it being a different generation. And it was massively important for me to have that structure when I first got into the industry that made me successful, where there are others who just couldn't abide it and walked out the other door and became successful in other areas of what they were doing. So I think, sitting on the fence a little bit in answer to your question is, I feel that what we're doing and the way we're running things is probably more suitable and relevant to today's marketplace. But I also recognize there's people there who are doing old school things in old school ways and having super success off it at the same time, because that's who and what they are. And they're very clear about their identity and what they're doing, which I think is just as important.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on the word clarity. As long as it's clear what someone is signing up for, then
Exactly right.
there's little room for, let's call it disappointedness in terms of expectations. And I think that's important because, okay, you might think that you're suitable for a certain environment and then find out through working there that actually that's not the case. But you can't say that it wasn't clear at the beginning. I think actually the problem comes when more old school style leadership companies try and portray themselves as something that they're not. And
I
that's what
absolutely agree with
creates
you. Yeah.
confusion.
100% agree with you, and that comes in every industry and every sort of I'm very much and I say this all the time in interviews that I do in our business is I'm very warts and all, so I'm very keen to give people the good, but and I always feel that I'm trying to put people off in interviews rather than do the other, because I'd rather give the good, the bad, and the ugly than sort of create this sort of we have in our industry, in the recruitment industry, we have a significant issue with churn and staff turnover. It's way higher than in most organisations and most industries. And I think that's because people will sit there and do the streets are paved with gold chat. They'll talk to people about what they can expect, and they will edit out the difficulty that it gets to when you've got significant reward, which you can get quickly in an industry, which you can in this one, with very little training or background required, and you can have people doing that. They'll hear what they want to hear in an interview, and they'll come in there and they'll expect it to be done. They expect the interview to be the hardest part of the whole process, but it's a hard job. And it's not easy, and 20% of the people make 80% of the performance in most recruitment businesses all over the world. And so to be in that 20%, you've got to graft and strive harder than I think most people expect to do it. So we're very, very clear at the start that this isn't just something which people fall into and then they can expect to have the sort of paychecks which they're anticipating at that sort of phase. So I'd much rather under promise and then hopefully over deliver on that side of things. I'd much rather be really clear about the good, the bad, and the ugly, what we're good at, what we're not good at. And I think if I'm talking to our customers at the same sort of stage, it's a really important part for them to be clear about that as well. And I think actually, there's probably a little bit of underselling that goes on in the technology space. So we have to try and coach that a little bit more to go the other way. But I think as entrepreneurial salespeople, you're probably a little bit more optimistic and you like to glamorize the top end rather than the bottom end.
No, and I love that because it's so important to be transparent through a process. It's so important to set clear expectations at work because that's where I see things start to go wrong. And where you start to have performance problems where employees don't necessarily understand what's expected of them and what great performance looks like. It's kind of hard to meet targets that are a bit airy-fairy and unclear.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that.
So I'd love to know more about you as a leader. How have you invested in yourself as a leader, and what steps do you take to grow and evolve as you're going along?
So look, I think this is such an important aspect of it, right? And I am an avid, as you can probably see behind, I'm an avid reader, and I pick up a lot of books. I love reading about this sort of stuff, from business to military to sport to everywhere you can possibly get those sort of lessons and see it. And the more you speak to people, the more you see people, the more you're meeting people. I've met some fascinating, collected some amazing people to speak to over the years. I've got some very strong mentors around me who are good to help and turn to for advice, who've been there and gone through various different things from lots of different industries around that. So I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by good people. 2013, we started working with a sports psychologist who turned business psychologist and looking at it from a different mentality. So I'm out with him next month for a full day up in Leeds, actually, looking at his hiring strategy and how he's helped different teams to grow and look at hiring in a slightly different way. So there's lots of different things to continuously look to do it, to continuously to take feedback as much as possible. I think that sort of aspect is there as well. I don't sit there and profess to be the all-seeing, all-knowing, etc., etc. I want people to give me feedback, no matter if it's the newest person or the oldest person. I have some, interestingly, in this business, there's some very new people that have graduated in the last 2 years, And I sort of see them as sort of internal consiglieri, so to speak, who are able to give me a different viewpoint of their peer group. Because I think, look, whilst I think I'm 20, my wife tells me a lot that I still think I'm in my 20s. There's a very different era to the generation we're seeing grow through the business. So what I can say and what I can sense and feel won't necessarily be what they're sensing and feeling. So to have people in the business, I think, is incredibly important who can talk to me and seek their opinion to actually help me develop as a leader to to every generation, as opposed to just what I've always seen and always done, and take it from there, or what I've read in a book or who I've spoken to externally, etc., etc. So look, it's a constant journey, and that's what I kind of love about the whole thing is that whilst I've been doing the same job for 23 years, I feel like it's a constant evolution, constant change, constant flux, and you're constantly learning. So Kaizen is one of our core values, Japanese manufacturing principle of continuous improvement. I'd like to think that as an individual, I'm very committed. Talking back to the example piece, I'm very committed to Kaizen and constantly looking to get better at what I'm doing and if I can.
Mm, I love that. I particularly want to draw on the point that we can learn from the younger generations. And experience is a wonderful thing, but it can become a double-edged sword if you believe that you know everything and there's nothing more to learn. In actual fact, we can learn from anyone. We can learn from the person on the street. We can learn from people much younger than us. And we can certainly learn from people on the front line, because in general, at the top of the organization, you're removed from the front line, and it's important to know what's going on there because it informs the decisions that you make. And so spending time getting feedback and talking to people is time well spent when you think about projecting forward. How are we moving forward with this business in the future?
Absolutely, and it's been invaluable. And they're great people with massive ideas and great ambition and energy and enthusiasm to do that. So I think it would be absolutely foolish for me just to sort of like sit there and ignore it. It's I've loved it. I love spending time with them. I love listening to them. I love thinking about the ideas and seeing things from a different lens. And it's if anything, it's rejuvenating.
Mm. So, final question, Toby. If you could go back in time and talk to your 20-year-old self, what piece of advice would you give to them?
So I think this is a really interesting question, isn't it? And I think back to maybe it wasn't 20, but it was certainly about well, it probably was around that sort of time. So my dad was a lawyer for 40 odd years, and I think he sort of went to work as opposed to really enjoyed work, and he gave us a great lifestyle, and I'm very grateful for everything he did. But I watched him, and it would be the last couple of days of holidays where his mood would change a little bit because he knew he had to go back to work. And obviously, look, he was very good at it, and he had some peaks, etc. But I knew that wasn't his. I think there was work and then pleasure. And when I was 20 years old and was thinking I would be a lawyer and go into that sort of thing, he was very keen to ensure that I did something which I loved, and I'd give exactly that same advice to myself if I went back to it. It's been the most, such an important bit, which I'm forever grateful for, to him for giving me, which is to go in there and find something which I really enjoyed and could be myself and would thoroughly enjoy. But coming up to work and for the last 23 years since finding this job, I've really enjoyed it. And look, there's been stress points. There's been stuff that we've gone through. There's been tougher parts. There's been difficult people to deal with at various different stages. There's been things that have gone right. There's been things that have gone wrong. But I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy the people aspect of it. And I feel like when it's the end of a holiday, I'm still looking forward to. I still love the holiday, but I'm also looking forward to going back at the same sort of time. So if I could go back to that, and as I say, look, my son's at 16 at the moment, and we'll be starting to think about career and universities and all that sort of stuff at this sort of stage. I'm saying the same sort of thing to him. It's just go out there and make sure you enjoy yourself, because it's a lot of time that you invest into your work thing. And I think the more you're invested into that because you're enjoying it, the better you'll be because of it.
Love what you do, and you'll never have to work a day in your life.
Someone wise said that, didn't they?
I'm trying to remember who the quote came from, but I can't
Yeah, I know.
remember.
Yeah, it's the one we all know, but no one can ever pin to. So I'll claim it.
Toby Babb, you heard it here first.
Yeah, exactly right.
So, Toby, thank you so much for this conversation today. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise, a real pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. And to my listeners, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as well. If you would like to take part in the Leading in the Modern Way video interview series, please do reach out to me. Bye.